Welcome back to Golden Fortune Leo, the quiet corner of the internet where we treat astrology like field notes, psychology like a user manual for the human heart, and storytelling like a bridge between the two. Today's message is simple and serious. Leo, what to avoid this weekend? A reminder for the chosen ones stepping into the year of triumph 2025 to stop bargaining with their own light. When was the last time you looked in the mirror and truly saw yourself, not the haircut you half regret or the posture you practiced for photographs, but the self behind the eyes, the pulse that used to walk into rooms with the effortless authority of a sunrise? Somewhere between being kind, being agreeable, and trying to survive in a culture that gets hives around confidence, you learned the costly trick of shrinking to fit, confusing humility with invisibility and courtesy with self-erasure. This weekend asks you to retire that habit. What's approaching isn't punishment or melodrama, it's quieter and more decisive, a threshold moment where your inner life asks, do you still remember who you are? If you do, the next choices become beautifully obvious. If you don't, this is your invitation to remember. Start with the most practical rule: stop making yourself smaller. No one wins when you minimize yourself. Studies of group dynamics and plain old common sense agree that a room does better when real ideas are allowed to breathe, and you, Leo, have been holding your breath for far too long. You've twisted your radiance into a version that keeps everyone comfortable. You've swallowed insights that could have saved hours. You've pretended to be low-key even though your temperament was built for ignition, not camouflage. Here's the paradox that trips so many lions. Every time you pretend to be less, you don't merely spare someone's feelings, you deprive the world of something it actually needs, which is the courage to move first. Your light is not arrogance, it is design. The same way a heart is designed to beat and the sun refuses to apologize for daylight. After years studying Leo behavior across relationships, workplaces, and community settings, I can name the pattern from a mile away: the lion who says sorry after roaring, the performer who hides behind the curtain while pretending they prefer logistics, the strategist who lowers their voice because an insecure person might shake. That script wastes time. And time is the only currency you can't earn back. Growth theory says we expand by friction, we rub against our edges, we test our assumptions, we risk being seen. By contrast, endless appeasement keeps you small and keeps the room mediocre. This isn't a license to grandstand, it's a call to inhabit your full height without theatrical apology. Practically, that means you speak the idea when it arrives. You take the credit you've earned, and you celebrate wins without that nervous laugh that pretends the victory was an accident. If your shine annoys someone, perhaps it's their pupils that need adjusting, not your wattage. Humor helps here. If a colleague mutters "must be nice," you can smile and say, "It is," and you're invited to the work it took. The Buddhist edge of this lesson is clean. Attachment to approval is a trap. Right effort does not equal small effort. Compassion includes yourself. Give generously, yes, but not at the price of ghosting your own spirit. If the room can only handle you at half volume, that room is under construction for your future, not a model of your worth. So this weekend, when you feel that old impulse to tuck your brilliance into a polite corner, pause and remember the basic contract of your sign. You are here to generate warmth, not to ration it, to lead with heart, not to laminate it, to take up the space that life assigned you and leave the rest of us a little braver for having watched you do it. Welcome back to Golden Fortune Leo, the place where astrology stops acting like a circus and starts sounding like human psychology with better lighting. I've spent decades studying patterns of energy, emotion, and ego, three currencies Leo trades in more fluently than Wall Street ever could. Today's conversation is about boundaries, the fine art of saying no without guilt, and the spiritual discipline of treating yourself as well as you treat everyone else. Call it a masterclass in emotional economy for the chosen ones stepping into the year of triumph 2025. Let's begin with the obvious but rarely practiced truth. Some people treat you like a chandelier. They don't care how you're wired, they just like how you sparkle. These are the ones who summon you whenever the party feels dead, who suddenly remember your number when their plans need life support, who treat your laughter as a soundtrack rather than a gift. They adore basking in your warmth but somehow misplace your existence once the lights come on. The universe, in its dry cosmic humor, has arranged this weekend to make that pattern visible. Watch who reaches for you only when they need recharging and who stays when the power's out. The psychology of it is simple. Leo energy radiates attention, it makes people feel significant, adored, briefly immortal. But unchecked generosity becomes an energy leak. Think of it like emotional plumbing. When you keep pouring love into cups full of cracks, you're not being compassionate, you're ignoring physics. You can't keep watering dead plants hoping they'll thank you. It's not cruelty to stop, it's conservation. Even the sun, your ruling star, rests nightly below the horizon without apology. Now, if guilt comes creeping in, whispering that you're being selfish, remember this: selfishness drains others, self-respect replenishes everyone. You're not a battery pack for broken souls. You're the source itself. And the source has a right to maintenance. Saying no doesn't make you unkind, it makes you sustainable. Besides, if someone's affection collapses the moment you set a boundary, it wasn't affection, it was dependency with a marketing budget. This brings us neatly to the second lesson: learning to trust your gut. That twist in your stomach before agreeing to a plan you already hate is not indigestion, it's intuition filing a formal complaint. You know the events I mean, the competitive meeting that smells like ego soup, the dinner where everyone performs happiness for social media, the favor that feels less like generosity and more like spiritual debt. Each yes that contradicts your inner no corrodes your energy. The Buddhists call it attachment, psychologists call it people-pleasing. Either way, the result is suffering disguised as courtesy. Say no as an act of spiritual hygiene. Decline the invite, skip the obligation, let someone else be the hero this week. The world won't stop spinning, but you might finally stop. The fear that saying no will make people love you less is the great Leo illusion. In truth, it's the only filter that reveals who loves you for real. The ones who value you will adjust, the ones who only valued your availability will fade, which is a blessing in extremely practical wrapping. Now to the hardest frontier: not other people, but yourself. You, Leo, can forgive anyone except the person in your mirror. You offer grace like confetti but ration it when your own name is on the mistake. That relentless critic in your head, half coach, half executioner, keeps whispering that you should be further along, shinier, more together. You scroll through other people's highlight reels and turn your own progress into a punchline. But here's the truth: growth doesn't happen on a schedule. Stars shine on different clocks. Comparing constellations makes as much sense as comparing heartbeats. That inner voice that says you're not enough isn't wisdom, it's fear wearing a fake ID, fear of failing, fear of being seen, fear that if the world looks too closely it will notice you're human. Newsflash, everyone already knows. The irony is that your imperfections are what make your light believable. People don't connect to perfection, they connect to courage, to the willingness to keep shining even with cracks. This weekend, treat kindness not as an abstract virtue but as a daily workout. When your inner critic starts rehearsing its usual insults, interrupt it with something embarrassingly gentle. Talk to yourself the way you would to someone you adore. If that feels unnatural, that's a sign you need the practice. Your self-talk isn't background noise, it's the script your life quietly follows. Change the dialogue, and the plot starts catching up. One more thing: humor helps. When you catch yourself spiraling into self-doubt, imagine your inner critic as a malfunctioning life coach wearing a bad suit. You can nod politely, take 0 notes, and continue your day. The Buddhists would call this non-attachment, the rest of us call it sanity. So, this weekend, remember 3 simple truths. First, you're not ornamental, you're elemental. Stop letting people borrow your light without paying the emotional electricity bill. Second, your intuition is not a negotiator, it's your built-in alarm system. If your gut says no, honor it. Third, perfection is not the entry fee for joy. You can't hide from the light you were born to be, you can only delay its debut. Consider this a gentle but firm reminder from someone who's watched countless Leos rediscover their worth the moment they stopped auditioning for love and started practicing it inward. The universe doesn't need a smaller version of you, it needs the real one, with the volume turned up and the guilt turned down. So take a deep breath, say no when it saves your peace, forgive yourself before breakfast, and let the rest of us bask in the warmth of someone who finally remembered they were never decoration, they were the whole damn chandelier. There comes a time in every Leo's story when the generosity of your heart begins to work against you, when kindness turns into a form of self-sabotage dressed in golden robes. You have always believed in people's potential, often more than they believe in their own, and you've spent years explaining away bad behavior as though compassion required a law degree. She's going through a lot. He didn't mean it. They just don't know better. I've heard every variation of those lines in my decades of research, and they all trace back to the same dangerous idea that understanding someone's pain justifies letting them trample your peace. It doesn't. Love is not meant to bruise on repeat. There are people in your orbit who have learned that your forgiveness is renewable energy, accessible at any hour with no interest charged. They withdraw from your emotional account, vanish until they run dry, then return for another round of understanding, because history says you'll let them. Stop being their safety net. Empathy was never meant to replace boundaries. When someone repeatedly shows you that they cannot or will not treat you with respect, it's not your spiritual duty to keep offering lessons in basic decency. Compassion without accountability is just enablement wearing a halo. And no matter how poetic it sounds to see the wounded child inside them, that child is now an adult with choices. You're not a rehabilitation center for emotionally irresponsible humans. You're a person with finite time and a nervous system that deserves rest. The Buddhist view would call this discernment compassion balanced with wisdom. You can wish someone well without walking back into the fire they started. Now, while we're at it, let's talk about the ridiculous modern illusion that someone else's light diminishes yours. Comparison is a disease of the scrolling age. You open your phone for a quick peek at the world and end up in a psychological demolition derby, convinced that someone else's highlight reel is evidence that you're late to your own destiny. You forget that the sun and the moon have shared the same sky for billions of years without ever filing a complaint. Light doesn't compete, it multiplies. When you shine authentically, you become living permission for others to do the same. The irony is that people rarely envy your actual success, they envy your courage to be visible. And that courage, Leo, is what makes you one of the chosen ones stepping into the year of triumph 2025. The moment you stop measuring your worth by external reflections, the universe starts reorganizing itself around your authenticity. Still, let's be honest, sometimes jealousy does sneak in like a mosquito at a summer barbecue. When it does, don't slap it away in shame. Get curious. Ask yourself what quality in them is simply reminding you of an underused part of yourself. Maybe their boldness is mirroring a part of your own that's been asleep. Maybe their success is a preview, not a competition. Reclaim that energy. That's emotional Aikido at its finest. You turn the sting into fuel. Next, there's the subtle violence of environments that demand you shrink to fit. You know the places. Jobs that adore your creativity but panic when your confidence walks in the door. Relationships that want your loyalty but not your fire. Friendships that love your humor but flinch at your honesty. You've stayed because adulthood whispered that fitting in is survival. But fitting in has never been your destiny, transforming has. Leo energy is alchemical. It takes ordinary rooms and turns them into theaters, turns conversations into inspiration, turns life into something slightly larger than life. So when you find yourself editing your personality to make others comfortable, understand that this isn't humility, it's suffocation. You haven't become too much. You've simply outgrown the container. The real work of this new cycle, especially as we step deeper into the year of triumph 2025, is refusing to shrink to fit the expectations of small thinkers. If the room can't hold your full presence, the problem isn't your size, it's their architecture. And here's a practical tip from social psychology: the fear of outgrowing people usually hides the fear of being alone. But solitude isn't punishment, it's a luxury suite for self-restoration. The people meant for you will recognize your volume and turn theirs up to match. Finally, we need to address the most exhausting pursuit of all: chasing approval from the uninterested. Some individuals will never like you, not because you've wronged them, but because your very existence threatens their unhealed parts. Your confidence shines light on their insecurity, and that glare burns. These are the ones who criticize you for being too much, too confident, too dramatic. Translation: you remind them of everything they wish they could be without apology. Trying to win them over is like auditioning for a play that doesn't deserve your talent. You can't negotiate your worth with people allergic to authenticity. Here's where the humor comes in. Imagine walking into a room full of people who don't like you and thinking, what an honor to make them uncomfortable with truth. That's the Leo approach done right. The moment you stop performing for the uninterested, your energy returns home, and you become the main character in your own story again. Social science supports this. Attention is a finite resource. Spend it where it multiplies, not where it evaporates. So, to tie this together, this weekend is not about punishing anyone or proving anything. It's about reclaiming your bandwidth. Stop translating disrespect into empathy, stop comparing your progress to illusions, stop kneeling before rooms that require your silence, and stop begging for applause from people who'd boo the sunrise. The spiritual truth underneath all this is disarmingly simple: your peace is proof of your growth. Every time you withdraw your energy from what insults your soul, you create space for what honors it. Leo, you are not here to play the background music in someone else's movie. You are here to direct, to score, and occasionally to improvise the entire scene when life forgets its lines. So as the weekend unfolds, let your generosity be guided by discernment, let your confidence be steady rather than loud, and let your humor remind you that the universe doesn't need you smaller to love you, it needs you awake. When you stop chasing respect and start embodying it, when you stop explaining pain and start choosing peace, you become the kind of light that doesn't just illuminate a room, it redefines what brightness means. There's a peculiar human superstition that life will one day deliver a perfect moment, an immaculate window where fear vanishes, confidence blossoms, and everything finally aligns. Leos, with your flair for drama and your instinct for excellence, you're particularly susceptible to this myth. You tell yourself that when the timing is right, when you've learned enough, when Mercury behaves for once, then you'll begin. But as someone who has studied the psychology of action for decades, let me break the spell: there is no ready. There is only begin. Courage is not the absence of trembling, it's the art of shaking while still stepping forward. The project you've been polishing in your mind? Start it. The message you've been rehearsing for weeks? Send it. The life you've been promising yourself? Live the rough draft version now. You don't need divine choreography or a cosmic thumbs up. The universe prefers motion over perfection. In Buddhist terms, it's called right effort, the understanding that progress happens through participation, not prediction. The first step, no matter how clumsy, is already a prayer, and the universe listens best to footsteps, not excuses. The funny thing is that waiting feels virtuous. We tell ourselves we are being cautious, strategic, mature. But often, waiting is just fear dressed in productivity's clothing. You research endlessly, you plan, you collect tools and mentors, yet somehow never cross the start line. The truth is you're not waiting for clarity, you're waiting for permission. And that permission has been sitting quietly in your own hands this whole time. Destiny doesn't require you to be fearless, it just needs you to show up. Fear is loud but temporary. Regret, however, is patient and permanent. Once you've begun stumbling, imperfect, alive, you'll discover the second secret, remembering who you are when no one's watching. Fame, applause, external validation, these are echoes, pleasant but fleeting. They can't sustain you because they were never designed to. What sustains you is the internal dialogue you hold in silence, the way you treat yourself when the stage lights dim. As someone who has watched countless Leos rise and burn out, I can tell you the greatest threat to your fire isn't failure, it's forgetting your source. Your true power doesn't come from attention, it comes from presence. The quiet kind. The one that doesn't need a witness. So this weekend, schedule solitude the way you'd schedule a meeting with a boss, because your higher self is the boss. No phone, no soundtrack, no performance. Sit long enough to hear the faint hum beneath the noise. That hum is the royal self, the part of you that doesn't chase affirmation because it already knows it is the affirmation. In a world addicted to visibility, your stillness becomes rebellion. When you can stand in that silence without collapsing, you've already won. A bit of humor, for balance, think of solitude as a spa day for your ego. You soak in honesty, scrub off comparison, and emerge less shiny but more real. The outer world may still demand its circus, but you'll know that the lion doesn't roar for applause, it roars because breathing that deeply is its nature. And since astrology is as much timing as it is temperament, here's your weekend cheat sheet. If you were born between July 23rd and August 2nd, stop accepting emotional crumbs and calling it romance. You're not starving, you're settling. Between August 3rd and 13, resist the temptation to water down your vision so others feel tall beside you. You're meant to lead, not comply. And if your birthday falls between August 14th and 22, don't crawl back into situations you've outgrown simply because the unknown makes you nervous. Comfort isn't always care, sometimes it's a gilded cage. The deeper message beneath all of this is simple. Life doesn't hand out perfect moments. It hands out opportunities disguised as inconveniences. The beginning you keep postponing may never look grand or ceremonial, it may look like an awkward email, a messy canvas, or a shaky hello. Start anyway. Then, when the applause eventually comes, you'll already know who you are without it. And that, Leo, is the kind of triumph no year, not even the year of triumph 2025 can improve upon. After decades of studying Leo behavior across cultures, workplaces, and relationships, I've come to a conclusion that still amuses me: your light scares people who haven't found their own. It's not malice, it's psychology. Human beings have an uneasy relationship with brilliance, especially when it shows up unapologetically. Your confidence acts like a mirror, reflecting both possibility and insecurity. Some people, instead of asking how to find their own flame, just squint at yours and call it too much. That's not your problem, that's their homework. You, Leo, were not built to dim yourself just because others refuse to open their eyes. Still, you often do. You shrink to make others comfortable, swallow your instincts, disguise leadership as politeness. And each time you do, the collective temperature of the world drops a degree. There's humor in this dynamic if you're willing to see it. The next time someone accuses you of being too intense, too loud, or too confident, smile and say, "You're welcome." After all, sunlight doesn't apologize for shining, it just suggests sunscreen. If your presence feels overwhelming, people are free to buy shades. It's their adaptation problem, not your behavioral flaw. And here's a paradox I've observed in countless Leos: you often confuse humility with disappearance. You think that being kind means taking up less space. But true humility isn't about vanishing, it's about radiating without arrogance. A star doesn't shrink to prove it's humble, it simply burns steadily, offering warmth without demanding worship. From a Buddhist perspective, your greatest spiritual challenge isn't pride, as your critics claim, it's attachment to applause. You are wired for recognition. Praise feels like oxygen to you. Yet, the higher form of mastery is to give without expectation, to perform without checking who's clapping. Non-attachment doesn't mean detachment, it means doing what you're meant to do, fully and joyfully, without needing the echo. When the lion roars, it's not asking for validation, it's responding to its own nature. To silence yourself for fear of judgment would be spiritual dishonesty. But to roar from ego, demanding everyone listen, is equally hollow. The middle path, the Buddhist would say, is to roar in truth and then return to peace. What makes Leo different from other fire signs is compassion. Your warmth is your leadership style. You rule not by force but by magnetism. Even your rivals can't stay angry for long, your sincerity disarms them. There's research in social psychology that supports this: people subconsciously trust those who exude genuine enthusiasm. It's contagious. So don't underestimate the quiet power of your heart. You're not a dictator of attention, you're a distributor of light. And when you lead from that softness, you don't just change rooms, you change atmospheres. Still, theory means little without practice, so let's turn insight into ritual. This weekend, start with one simple sentence: I choose to shine again without fear. Write it down. Say it out loud. Don't post it online as a slogan, whisper it as a vow. The act of speaking your intention is powerful. Sound carries memory, and the body remembers what the mouth declares. Then, revisit one dream you've been delaying. Don't plan the entire empire, just build the first brick. Send that email, draft that page, pick up the brush, make the call. Action is the universe's favorite language. Next, stand before a mirror and thank your reflection, not for what it looks like, but for surviving everything that tried to make it smaller. Self-respect grows louder when it hears itself spoken. Finally, rest, not the lazy, escapist kind, but the sacred kind, where you stop performing and simply exist. Rest, in its purest form, is an act of faith that your worth doesn't depend on constant production. And now for the larger reflection. This weekend is not about fireworks or grand gestures. It's the beginning of an internal revolution, the quiet decision to stop apologizing for being alive in full color. When you reclaim your right to take up space, you don't need to chase love, success, or opportunity, they are drawn to you naturally. The universe recognizes its reflection in anyone who stands fully in their authenticity. When you remember your nature, everything else remembers you. Kings and queens never beg for permission, they simply reign. Carry that truth with you. Avoid the small talk that dulls your magic, the environments that box your instincts, the thoughts that whisper you're not enough. You've spent years seeking a sign from the cosmos, and here it is, hidden in plain sight. You are the sign. You are the light you've been searching for. You always were. You always will be. In this year of triumph 2025, stop waiting for confirmation that it's your time, it already is. The script has been ready, you were just waiting to step on stage. But this time, let the performance be for yourself. Shine with grace, because elegance has more impact than noise. Shine with humor, because laughter keeps your fire human. Shine like the chosen one you are, because authenticity is the purest prayer. And when you do, watch how life rearranges itself around your frequency. The right people will appear not as saviors, but as mirrors reflecting your best self back to you. The right paths will unfold not as miracles, but as logical responses to your courage. The right love will arrive not to complete you, but to walk beside you in equal light. So go ahead, Leo, roar, rest, repeat. Take your throne not as a symbol of ego, but as a celebration of alignment. The world doesn't need another star pretending to be modest, it needs you, fully illuminated. And if anyone dares to complain about the brightness, well, tell them the shades are still on sale. If this message resonates, share it, pass it along, and help another Leo remember their own light. Like, share, and subscribe to Golden Fortune Leo, not because I need the numbers, but because this channel exists to remind every lion out there that shining isn't vanity, it's service. Each time you reclaim your brilliance, you give the rest of us permission to remember ours. The light returns through you. And this, Leo, is only the beginning.